Hello, my name's Ed Poole and I'm a member of the Green Party. We currently have our national executive elections and I'm meeting with candidates to find out why they're running and why we should vote for them. Today I'm speaking to Thomas Atkin Withers, who is running to be international coordinator. Hiya.
Yeah.
Why did you join the Green Party and why do you think other people should?
So I joined the Green Party, I say a while before COVID, which feels like an age. Um, it was Trump was coming for his first state visit at the time. So fun times. There were protests all over the UK. And I went to the one in Sheffield. It was my first ever protest. I was still in secondary school at this point. I hadn't even got to sixth form yet. And Natalie Bennett was speaking. And she was, there was Labour at people and a few of the Dems, and but she spoke and I was so impressed by that. Kind of, I was already politically aware, but I was so impressed by kind of what she was saying and agreeing with what she was saying. I joined the party the next day. And I think other people should join well, because I think we're the best hope we've got, quite frankly. I know that might be a bit surprising from a Green Party member saying that we're the best there is, but I think given everything that everybody's struggling with, whether it's the cost of living, whether it's being threatened because your house is on the edge of a cliff and about to be eroded and washed out into the sea, or whether you're just struggling generally, the Green Party has policies that are actually going to help the people in this country, and as well as obviously outside this country to try and diffuse some of the international tension that's going on alongside everything else. That we're open, we're honest, and that we really do politics differently. We don't just say we do. We actually do things differently. We're not mired in all the cronyism to an extent and scandal that you find in a lot of other parties. We've not been around for eons, and so we can actually bring something new to the table.
What do you think of the Green Party electoral strategy known as Target to Win?
This is a complicated one. Before I kind of got involved at the national level, I was the election coordinator for Sheffield Green Party for 2 years. And I'm a ward organizer in Sheffield as well. So I'm very familiar with Target to Win and have a complicated relationship with it. It has its merits, don't get me wrong. It has got us to where we are now, and it still gets people elected. I don't get kind of, oh, you have to do it as exactly the book says. It doesn't work for everyone. And, you know, Target to Win is important, but it is not a one size fits all policy. And I think we treat it as it is. I think it can mean that we don't go to certain communities in our cities and towns. We'll avoid council estates, we'll avoid areas where there are potentially where there are large numbers of people where English isn't their first language because we think, oh, they might not vote or it's too difficult. We don't actually always go out to those communities where actually they're the people that need our help the most. And I think as well, it is very heavy on the ground. It mean you need a lot of volunteers to run a Target to Win campaign, in my experience. And when you're getting into you're running 5 or 6 ward campaigns in one council area, it's a lot of people. Sheffield has over 1,000 members, and even we struggle to get the amount of members out we need. And so sometimes it's wondering, are there more efficient ways to do things? I think some of it does still hold water, but I think we need to take a long, hard look at Target to Win and realise that maybe it hasn't quite moved with the times.
What's your feeling on electoral pacts?
Depends who with. Um, if we're talking Corbyn and the new Corbyn party, whatever they've decided the name is this week, I'm not sure because it doesn't exist yet properly. It's not got policy, it's not got a structure. We don't know we know the headliners, but we don't know who the rest of the band are. And much like whenever I end up in HMV and end up buying a vinyl record, if I don't know more than two of the songs, I'm not buying it because it's a waste of money. I don't want to be getting involved if we don't know who kind of the values of this organization. I mean, I'm not against something, an electoral pact in the long run, but it also has to work for us. I mean, we've got 4 MPs, 853 councillors or whatever number we're on this week. Um, and we exist. We've got 2 members of the House of Lords. We've got 60,000 members. We need it to work for us as well. And so, if it was something along the lines of joint candidacies, then I'd be more open. If it was a stand down pact, it would depend on what was offered. I also believe that that needs to be the decision of the members. If I was elected to GPEX, I'd make sure I'd be demanding party-wide referendum on any electoral pact offered, because I think in the end it has to be our members' decision. If they want it, then fine, we go for it. If they don't want it, then we don't. We don't drag people where they don't want to go. But we have to make sure it works for us too. If it was with other parties, I'm less enthusiastic. Obviously, I wouldn't want to be working with the Tories or Reform. I want us as far away from them as possible. I don't think their pact with the Lib Dems would make much sense at the moment, unless we were doing it in relation to Europe. If we were saying, elect a big pro-European thing, we'll go with Kim. Obviously, I don't think we'd work with Labour at the minute. I think anything that happens with Labour would happen once the election has happened. If we ended up working with them, if they needed help, if they're in minority government and needed a few MPs to get them to a majority, I think that's when we discuss that. And then there's parties like the Workers' Party, which again, I don't want us working with. I don't think economically left but socially conservative parties are somewhere we want to be going. I don't think we should be anywhere near Galloway or kind of that breed of politician. Um, but again, it needs to be down to the members at the end of the day. On the local level, they can sometimes be really effective. Other times they can sink the ship. So we need to be we need to tread carefully and realise that this may not work out well for us. And we need to make sure, much like with Brexit, we actually have all the information we can before we make the decision.
That's one of the best answers I got to that one.
Oh wow.
No one else has really gone into much detail. They've sort of gone, well, it depends, really. And they kind of left it at that. But you kind of went and said, yes, no, definitely not, maybe. And it's a bit more interesting. Um, how do we make a bigger impact in the media?
Oh, so firstly, we need someone really good doing external comms. I think it's been quite piecemeal the past few years, and I'm happy that we might be getting some new blood into that. I've seen some of the candidates, and some of them are amazing, and so I'd like to see what happens. But I think part of it is having a leader that can't be ignored to an extent, and having politicians that can't be ignored, who are going to go out there and say what needs to be said and do what needs to be done. Who aren't scared to pick a fight, who aren't ashamed of what we believe in, and actually go out there and make the media want to come and see us and come to us and interview us. Um, you can only do so much with the media, because if they want to ignore you, they'll just ignore you to an extent. But I think you can do a lot by actually having someone in as a leader who isn't afraid to end up on the front pages, even if it is of the Daily Mail. Even if you're being called a whack job, you're doing something right. If the Daily Mail's saying you're a whack job, you're doing good in my book. Most of the time, I'll preface that. But yeah, I think we definitely need more charismatic and outgoing leadership in our party in order to do better with the media and have better media training for local play membership and media officers and things like that, so we can get press releases out and things when we're doing stuff at the local level. We've done quite well with that in Sheffield. We've got an excellent media guy who films really good videos for us, does animated text, the whole lot, and it looks really professional, and that's great. That's not attainable for every local party, and so not you don't always have someone who knows how to do that. We need to be training our people up, upskilling them so they know how to do these things.
How do we attract non-white voters and members to the Green Party?
Now, if you can't already tell, I'm white, so I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on this because I'm not. It's not my position to speak for anyone of a global majority background saying how it's best to get their communities involved, because we need to be led by them. But I think we definitely need to be much better at working with people who aren't stale, pale, and male in our party. We still have that air of kind of middle class white men, uh, ruddy people of the country who decided to join the Green Party because they had nothing to do on a Sunday. And I think we need to throw that off completely. I think we need, in our local parties, we need to do better at actually reaching out, because some days we don't even try. Some local parties are kind of sticking with the more white suburban middle class demographic and thinking that'll keep them safe. I don't think it will. I think we do need to reach out. I think we do need to look at things, for example, doing literature and things in other languages. If we have, even if it's not, paper literature in other languages, you could say if you need it in another language, scan this and you can find a copy in whichever language is predominant in the area. Um, but I think as well for a lot of it we just sometimes need to sit and listen. You know, people, all sorts of people have all sorts of different lived experience, and that may make their viewpoints different. I mean, I'm proudly working class, and I have a very different viewpoint to a lot of people in our party because of where I grew up and the people I grew up with. And I think that's the same for everyone. And so sometimes we need to listen and work out where people are coming from and realize that just because that's not what we would have thought, that's not what we would have done, it doesn't make it any less of a valid decision, a valid belief. And that working together and actually listening is key.
How can the Green Party assure disabled people that we are listening to them?
I mean, you should say that as I am a disabled person. I'm not sure if you can tell. I also have hearing aids, so if I start going really quiet, I only got them 2 days ago. So if I start going really quiet, my battery's died. But um, I think firstly, obviously, I'm proud of the work we've done standing against the benefit cuts. I think we could have been louder on some things. Obviously, Sean wrote to all the MPs, but I think I think we could have had if we had better external comms, we could have gone even further with that. I think we need to make sure that disabled people are feeling listened to. I know that there are parts of the party where I haven't felt listened to because I'm disabled. That when we've been planning local party meetings, I've had to put my foot down and say, no, if it's upstairs and there's no lift, you're not doing it because if we can't get there, then how the hell are we meant to take part in the first place? I think there are obviously some places where so people as a group are not one homogenous lump. We don't always agree. You know, assisted dying was one of the big things where there were multiple viewpoints all across the community. And even if our MPs are in that position, it's making sure they listen to everyone and making sure they realise, why people are coming to them with, saying, "Oh, I'm really for this," or "I'm really against this," or "This is really concerning me." I think as well, it's making sure our party is actually accessible. Party is not easy to get used to. I've been a member for over 5 years, and I'm still struggling to work out how you do things sometimes. Our processes aren't simple. It's not always easy to find out, what you need to do to make a policy or to get in touch with a working group or even get involved in your local party. And so we need to make it much easier, and much more accessible. I mean, the members' website's on a very basic level at the minute now. So it's down for maintenance, and so you can only get on a few links, which is really crap in the middle of kind of preparing for conference if we need to see things. There's been problems with the policy website. You've not been able to get a lot of people, including myself, have struggled to get on it when it was moved to the policy archive. It was asking for logins that then weren't going through, and it was just blocking you from getting on, which again isn't great when you're trying to make conference motions and things. We don't make it easy, and I feel like sometimes we're trying to reinvent the wheel when there's something perfectly good that we could just, we can make it look good and be easy to use instead of trying to make it look like the fanciest thing since sliced wholemeal bread. When in reality, you know, we could just make it so much easier.
I put that question in because of some of the responses I saw to the Green Party all voting for the assisted dying bill. And that's one of the reason I put that question in. You're the first person who's mentioned assisted dying in the
Well,
answer. Obviously, the question can
yeah.
mean a lot. It's quite an open question, but you're the first person who's actually raised that.
Wow.
How should we handle transphobia in the Green Party?
So where I come from, I'm now a university student, and so I'm a social science related course is what I do. And so there is something called the tolerance paradox. It's kind of being tolerant of intolerance leads to an intolerant society. I don't think we should be tolerant of intolerance in the same way I don't think we should be tolerant of ableism, Islamophobia, racism, misogyny, etc., etc. I don't think we should be tolerant of transphobia. If people aren't necessarily clued up, which is fair, not everyone is. It's not an easy thing to necessarily to get into. I had a one of our ex-councillors in Sheffield come to me today and ask me to for a book recommendation so he could try and understand it more. I think it's being open for people who are acting in good faith and realizing that you can't save them all, and that sometimes people are too far gone and they're being disrespectful, they're being abusive, that maybe this might not be the right place for them. This might not be conducive to keep trying and having the same conversation over and over. I think it was Zach who used this quote. Even the broadest churches have walls, and I think sometimes people need to realize that we care about more than just the environment. The environment is obviously massively important to the Green Party, but we care equally about social justice issues, about economic justice, and kind of you can't pick and choose which bits you're willing to subscribe to. We are a party. If you don't like it, go form your own. But I'm a big believer that sometimes through education people can change, but sometimes people are just a bit too far gone, and I don't think we should be subjecting some of our trans, non-binary, and generally queer members to some of the utter vitriol that they've received. I think it's a safeguarding risk to an extent. I'm a safeguarding officer for it. I'm a kind of inclusion and safeguarding officer for the branch of the Young Greens Society at my uni. I have safeguarding training because I'm a charity trustee. I know that if someone was being that abusive in those settings, you would not let them continue. I don't see why we should be in our party. And I come from Sheffield Green Party, a party that struggled with this a lot. And obviously we are now getting out of it, but it's been really horrendous. And I know a lot of members, including myself, have nearly left at some points because of how vitriolic it has got. When you have people texting you 2 o'clock in the morning having a go at you, it's not what you want. And it's not conducive to good mental health, never mind, something you actually want to take part in. So I think sometimes we do just need to say, right, enough is enough. Goodbye. This is not an airport. You don't need to announce your departure. Just go.
How important is social and economic class in politics?
As I mentioned at the start of the last one, I do a social science adjacent course, and I'm also working class. I grew up on one of the poorer council estates in my city. If you look on the indices multiple deprivation map of Sheffield, you'll see kind of a very big red kind of blob, which is the eastern half of our city, a very big blue blob, which is the less deprived west of the city. And you see a little island of red in the south, it's kind of the southwest, and that's where I grew up. I think it's still enormously important. I think to an extent it kind of got a bit less important for a bit, and it's become more important as society's become even more polarized, um, objectified. I think it's still extremely important. I mean, my dad was a not to sound like Keir Starmer, but my dad worked in the steel industry in Sheffield for most of his life. He worked as a forgeman before he had to retire because of disability. He voted Labour for most of his life. He now is a Green Party member. I finally managed to convert him after quite a few years of me prodding him. But my mum, as well, was a Labour Party member for 27 years. She was a full member of the Labour Party. She just left over the benefit cuts. I think it is massively important, and I think it's important too because we don't always go to working class communities and actually listen to them and realize that they've got problems. We kind of think, oh, well, no one votes there. The turnout's been going down for the last 5 years. Let's not bother. Or, oh, it's a council estate. I'm going to go out there, on a door knocking session in the evening, get mugged, and therefore I don't want to do it. And I think we need to kind of get rid of that mentality. I know Natalie's also a member of Sheffield Green Party, Natalie Bennett, and she was very keen. Kind of, she got out in a ward called Manor Castle. That is the most deprived ward in our city, and she was consistently trying to get us out and out and doing things there because she saw the potential, even though it's a very working class area. And now we are actually trying to get a councillor there, hopefully next year. But especially as well with reform and the threat of reform on the horizon, it's terrifying to see that the places that I grew up might go that way. And I think for a lot of them, it isn't that they necessarily believe in the rhetoric of reform and the rhetoric of, it's the immigrants' fault and everything like that. I think it's because they feel abandoned and they want to stick a massive middle finger up at people sometimes. I know even my mum, who's kind of more politically aware than the average person, thought about voting for reform at one point, not because she actually agreed with any of their policies, because she hates Nigel Farage, but she just wanted to put a middle finger up at Keir Starmer, and it'd feel cathartic to do that. I think we can provide both parts of that. We can provide an actual political alternative and that middle finger aspect at the same time. We can give Labour a good slapping and actually be there for our communities. And so I think the Green Party is the best people to kind of take on the issues of social class and economic class and actually go and realize that you can have the poorest wards and the richest wards in the same city be represented by the same party, and we can actually equally listen to both of them.
What other issues are important to you?
I don't know why my camera's kind of gone really dark, but if you can't see right kind of here, there is a massive map of the world. So if you can't really tell, international stuff is very important to me. Um, it's a big part of kind of how I got into the Green Party. I joined the Green Party post Brexit when and there were still calls for people's vote. I do want to us to rejoin the EU. I think we're better in than out. I don't think the EU is perfect by any means. I think it needs massive reform in terms of both its economic policy and in terms of the way things work with veto and things like that. But I think you have to be in the room to change things. And obviously, we're seeing so many awful things happening in the world right now, whether it's in Gaza, in the Congo, now in Thailand and Cambodia, in Ukraine. And it kind of working internationally has never been more important. And obviously, with the big orange elephant over the Atlantic, the kind of everything that we thought was happening, we thought there was a consensus across the world we needed to act on climate change. There isn't, it's broken. And so I think we need to step up and realize that we have a responsibility to work internationally and work with our sister parties all around the world, not just in Europe, because I do think we can be too Eurocentric sometimes to actually try and solve stuff. Um, Apart from that, kind of disability rights is massively important to me. I'm disabled, my husband is disabled, my parents are both disabled. Kind of we have a long line of disability in my family, and that's very important to me. If the Green Party adopted certain policies that, let's say the Green Party was suddenly in favour of the benefit cuts, I would not be sticking around. As much as I agree with everything else, that is a red line for me. It never would, fingers crossed. But, disability rights are massively important to me. Queer rights are massively important to me. As I've mentioned, I have a husband and I am non-binary. I am very much a member of the alphabet mafia. And I don't I'm not willing to budge on making sure that my kind of siblings feel safe. Apart from that, obviously, welfare, council housing, that kind of thing is where a lot of my expertise lies. I grew up on a council estate. I'm a trustee for a charity that looks after young carers, so these people under the age of 18 that have caring responsibilities for their families. So you hear stories about kind of 9, 10 year olds dispensing um, medication for the parents, which is terrifying. And a lot of that is in poorer areas of Sheffield and the poorer areas of our country. And in areas where, for instance, the council doesn't have the money to have at-home carers and things like that. Sheffield's nearly lost at-home social care a few times. We've really struggled, and it's putting a massive drain on the council's resources, but we keep it going because we need to, because we know what happens if we don't. It's people like that will pick up the slack. Is people will stop going to school, people will stop going to see friends, people become more isolated because we've not put services in place. And so I think everything kind of links together, but social justice is massively important to me, and I don't think we can discard that. I think that is part of the reason why our society is so messed up at the minute is the fact that we've had 20 well 14, 15, 16, however long years of not investing in societal infrastructure. We might invest in our railways and our roads, but we're not investing in things like the offshore start centres and childcare and um, upscaling council housing. And so what we're actually finding is people are kind of stuck on their own and are fed up and isolated and depressed because everything they thought they had has kind of fallen apart. On a final note, again, on the international kind of air of things, public transport is very important, especially international public transport for me. It's a weird niche for me, but I think, we it kind of sticks with my climate roots that we need to stop frequent flying and things like that. And the only way we're going to do that is by making it possible to go places without flying. I mean, obviously, we're not going to ask someone to go by bus from here to Perth. I think that might be pushing it a bit. But me and my husband go on holiday by train because we prefer it. And yeah, okay, it's not easy. You have to go all the way to London and then get over. But once you're on the continent, it's so much easier. I think that's something we need to do better. We argue consistently and rightly against things like airport expansion, but we need to provide an alternative. And I mean, Doncaster Sheffield Airport was closed because it wasn't making a profit. Rather than trying to reopen that, which is what the Mayor of South Yorkshire, Oliver Coppard, wanting to do at the minute, why don't we actually try and fix things so we can have international trains coming further north than London? So it's easier to get on the Eurostar and end up in Paris or Geneva or wherever you want to go, or Benidorm, because God knows we need connections to places people actually want to go and not just business people. And, say, right, okay, can go there in an environmentally conscious manner, in a way that doesn't harm the planet, and that is what I can also afford. I think that's the key thing is with the climate crisis generally is making sure that it isn't the poorest people in our society that end up paying the price.
Why do you think we should vote for you, and what will you do if you're elected?
Well, you should vote for me because I'm amazing. No. You can vote for me because we need someone who's competent and experienced in working with international stakeholders. Not only have I done that in my role as a charity trustee, I've been to international conferences, I've spoken at international conferences, I've worked with young carer groups from Sheffield to Tokyo. It's been amazing. I'm thoroughly rooted in international politics in the Green Party. I've been the international officer for the LGBTIQ plus Greens for the last 3 years now, about three, maybe nearly 4 years. And I've been on the Young Greens International Committee for 2 years. I've been on the National Party's International Committee for 1 year. I was elected at Manchester Conference. We need someone who can work with people from other countries and is willing to work with them on a number of issues, not just one or two issues. That sometimes you can find the most unlikely bedfellows that, sometimes going into a room with the thought of, right, these people hate me, these people love me, type things out is not the best way to do things. Going into a room thinking that people have preconceived notions of everything, it's not a great way to do that. And I like to think of myself as being open and realizing that sometimes people who you might not suspect actually have various different kind of things behind them and actually change their minds and hear reason on some things. Um, on what would I do if I was elected? I think one massive thing I'd like to do is pan-European activist training and more global activist training rather than just pan-European. The fight against the far right does not stop at borders, and climate change doesn't stop at borders either. And I don't think we can either. And we've all found different messaging that cuts through, different ways to campaign that cut through. I went to an event in Malta for the European Green Party in 2023, and they had kind of various bits of people's campaign materials there that we could have a look at while I was there. And I think it was the Norwegian Greens did for their stalls in university campuses. They had Green Party branded condoms. These things work sometimes. It might not be something you think of. It's definitely not in target to win, but it sometimes does things. And I think we can learn from one another a lot more than we do currently. I also think we need to have more democratic and open international politics in our party. It wasn't easy to get involved, and it isn't easy to get stuck in. We have some of the most amazing, passionate people in our party who really care about certain things, but just can't get involved because it isn't easy. I think firstly we need them to be able to find out what we do, make our meetings observable, make sure the international committee has an email list so we can send out saying, oh, this is all the stuff we've been doing. And have people join our meetings and have Q&A sessions and things like that. But also for when it comes to selecting people for international conferences, delegates, although I'll come on to why that might be an issue in a moment. We need a more democratic system where people can put their names forward because sometimes you can have the best people that could ever be, a delegate to something in the place you least suspect them to be, but you don't get to them because you decide who's right there next. You decide member of international committee or a member of GPEX instead of, oh, actually, there's this amazing person who's a lawyer and has 32 degrees and is, or this person who's lived all over Europe and knows the German political system well and the Greek political system well and knows all these issues. Maybe they're the better people to go. One thing that has happened in the European Parliament recently is on the direction of the Council of Europe, they've had to pass a law which is changing how the European Green Party functions. So now countries like the UK will most likely only be associate members because we are not in the EU. This massively reduces our power in the EGP. This is obviously a very bad decision, and I know the Greens across Europe have been campaigning against this and managed to get it so we weren't excluded completely because that was the initial proposal that we wouldn't be allowed to be members at all. It ain't great. So we've been dealt really crap cards, and obviously this must be one of those amazing Brexit benefits we've seen. But I think we need to do the best we can. And I think we need to realize that Europe is more than the EU as well. That there are, there's Ukraine, there's Serbia, students in Serbia are rising up against their government, but Ukrainians protesting against laws that are going to make it a bit easier to be corrupt in Ukraine at the minute. You've got Moldova, who's literally right in the interface with kind of Ukraine and Russia, not too far away, and they're sticking their guns up and saying, you know what, no, we're not going to let you threaten us. We're going to stand up for what we believe in. Europe is so much more than the EU. While I totally believe in the EU as an organ of kind of change, I think we also need to realize that we hold a lot of power as non-EU states, and we need to work more together. And I'd love to work more closely with states like Switzerland, Norway, Ukraine, Serbia, Turkey, to actually work out how do we influence the EGP now that we don't have necessarily have a vote anymore.